Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it's an honour to be invited on your show, so thank you very much.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. It's an honour to meet somebody of your calibre, and I don't say that lightly. One of my philosophies in life is get out there and smash it, because you only get one life, and when it's gone, it's gone. And we met through LinkedIn. Sorry, I just got to pop up here. Yeah, we met through LinkedIn, and I'm guessing when you send your CV to someone, not that you have to do that these days, but it must be quite hard narrowing it down.
Oh, I mean, that's very kind of you to say. I think of myself as just a pretty ordinary guy, and I follow your philosophy. You know, one life, you know, make maximum use of it, and then pretty much I've been very fortunate. I've been able to accomplish a lot of the things I've set out to do, but I think I didn't necessarily put it together as a CV to try and impress people. It was more of a case of doing the things I enjoy, and everything else kind of flowed from that.
Yes, no, I totally get it. What I'm going to do, I don't normally do the kind of interview thing, but it for the benefit of our friends at home, I just want to read out a rough synopsis here, because it is quite, as I say, it's incredibly impressive. Feel free to correct me after, Chris, but so you were a Royal Marine, you trained as an officer at Sandhurst, did P Company, you flew attack helicopters, namely the Apache, which is just, I think, every little boy's dream. Well, the mental ones like us anyway. You then went on to fly in the Air Force. You're a racing instructor, and now you run a company called V-Force. And I've watched your promotion videos, and it's like James Bond, Jason Bourne shoved into a Ford Sierra with lots of people chasing them.
That's pretty much it. That's a good summary. Yeah, I think so. I set out originally to be a pilot, and I'd be very interested to chat to you about your flying a little later on if the chance allows. But I set out to be a pilot, and I knew, coming from a relatively humble background, beginnings, it was going to be a lot of work to get up to a standard where I could be accepted into the training. And then once I was accepted, then getting through the training was potentially, in my mind, there was going to be quite a challenge. But I was so focused on being able to do it, I was going to give it everything I had. And as a result of that, all the preparation that I needed to do to get accepted in the first place, that was quite a substantial journey. So I originally decided for sure that I was going to become a pilot at 13, and I joined the Air Cadets. I took that very seriously, got fully immersed in that. Went to join the RAF at 16 with a scholarship, a sixth form scholarship, but I was unsuccessful with that, and they basically told me that I needed to get more life experience, grow up, be a bit more impressive. And I was like, okay, fair enough. What do I need to do to be, accepted? What would be better in their eyes? And just reeled off a list of things that potentially I could go and do that would just give me that chance to be accepted into the training. And a large feature of that was, so I joined the Royal Marines Reserves, and that was a significant tipping point in my life, because up until that point, I hadn't really sort of tested myself in a physical challenge realm. And of course, so I was still doing my A levels. I was 17, and I know, obviously, guys, used to join at 16, and it's probably, it's a pretty demanding thing. Your body hasn't necessarily fully formed at that stage, so all the rigors of getting thrashed around, Woodbury Common and the bottom field, everything else was. That for me, that was quite a step out of my comfort zone, to be able to spend my weekends getting beasted, and then I was still doing my A levels during the week. Where on a Friday night, just to be clear, I was a reservist. I was never in the regular Royal Marines, but I don't know how much you know about the RMR, but they pretty much.
I don't. I should just say here for our friends, I make no distinction. If you're a Marine, you're a Marine, and I know, Marty, my producer, was RMR, and I think he kind of made this humble. I'm not going to call it an apology, but I was like, Marty, if you're a bootneck, you're a bootneck. You wear the green beret. That's it.
Well, thank you for saying that. But for me, that's how I felt. I pretty much, you take 6 months or 32 weeks of regular Royal Marine recruit training, and you've got to try and spread that over a couple of years into weekends and 2-week courses. So obviously bits go by the wayside. So there's a lot less drill, and probably some of the less critical elements don't necessarily get covered, but the core bits are still there. Obviously, you've got to be able to get through all the physical tests and culminate with a commando course, and clearly there's a bit of time in the field. So pretty much, so every other weekend on a Friday night, all my mates would be going out and they'd be down the pub, and they're like, "Come and join us." Oh, well, I can't, because I'm voluntarily going to go down to Livingston and spend the whole weekend getting thrashed and parading in Peter's pool at 3 a.m, whatever other shenanigans were going on. But that was really useful, because once I managed to get through the training and get my green lid, the sense of accomplishment for doing that was incredible, and that gave me the confidence to appreciate that I could turn my hand to a lot of things that weren't necessarily my natural skill set. So there were guys who were a bit older, a lot fitter, some big, strong-looking guys, and falling by the wayside, not getting through the training just because they didn't have that focus and commitment. And it's very clear that it was an early life lesson. If you want to do something, if you put your mind to it and you commit yourself properly and work really hard, then it's very much achievable. So, that in itself, early on as a lesson in life, that spurred me on to achieve a whole bunch of other things that eventually got me into the cockpit. So, I went to university. I continued with the RMR. So I did a little bit of officer training and a bit of other specialist courses. And then I had my place at Sandhurst, so I could immediately go into the next intake. So a couple of weeks after graduating from uni, straight into the September intake at Sandhurst. But at this point, I knew I wanted to be an Apache pilot, but there was no guarantee of doing that. So the way it works as an officer, you go to Sandhurst, spend the first 6 months going through the training, and then you decide which regiment you want to go to. But they may not necessarily accept you, and it just sort of, it's if there's a vacancy and you're the right character for the job. But by then I'd fully committed myself to doing this. I'd worked really hard at uni, so again, I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as a natural academic, but I applied myself, and when you're guided by a vision, you're motivated, you've got a dream you want to go and achieve, you're willing to put up with 3 years of graft, and it worked. So I got my place in the Air Corps, and then pretty much that was straight into pilot training. Although at that stage I had the opportunity, as all other junior officers did, to go and do an attachment to the infantry, and that's where the bit about being attached to the paras came in. So I just figured if I've got the opportunity to spend 6 months stretching myself, learning, and developing everything I've just spent 12 months at Sandhurst covering, then I figured that the paras would be another interesting dimension. So gave me a chance to go and do P company, gave me a chance to go and do my jumps course. I spent a little bit of time out in South Armagh, and just see what the banter between the Marines and the paras is all about, and just get a fair feel. I was going to say,
those paras are really rubbish, aren't they?
Do you know what? I think loyalty to whichever unit you first start with is probably the one you identify with the most. And even though I only spent 5 years ish, just over, as a Royal Marine reservist and was doing other things, I still have a strong affinity for the Marines. I still identify with them. Yeah, it was amazing to go and spend some time with the Paras, and they are some really impressive blokes, but it is a distinctly different mindset and a different culture. But one that, I mean, it works, and they're good, aggressive shock troops. But yeah, it's there's a different flavour. I think everybody's going to warm to whatever one culture or another. And I think for me, I personally preferred the bootneck vibe, but not to say I have big respect for them.
An interesting thing, Chris, is I think you're the third, maybe even the fourth pilot I've had on the show. And also Colin McLaughlin of SAS notoriety, or celebrity, I should say. We all share something in common. We all got failed from the RAF our first time around.
Is that so? Wow.
Obviously, I never went back. I joined the Marines instead. Yeah, it seems a very common thing that us kind of personalities that are actually the kind of people the forces want don't get accepted through the RAF recruitment process the first time.
Yeah.
So I kind of like to think of it that Colin was SAS, didn't get accepted by the RAF, nor did I. Therefore, I'm probably SAS material. But a great lesson there for everybody is all the pilots I've spoken to, none of them were natural academics. They all came out with 1 or 2 A levels, middle grades, and they all said they had to work at it. And I think that's refreshing to hear, doesn't it? There's a chance for anybody.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think I did reasonably well at school because I applied myself, and I guess I'm relatively bright, but I wouldn't say I'm a super intellect by any stretch. And because I had that motivation, I knew I needed to get reasonable grades in order to be accepted in the pilot training. I was willing to knuckle down. Didn't make it easy. I'm an action guy. I want to go out and do things. I want to go and drive cars and fly planes and ride motorbikes. And sitting in the classroom learning stuff didn't necessarily just fall naturally to me. But I was willing to do it. I think that's the difference. You can have people who are naturally very intelligent, but with no clear direction in life, maybe not willing to knuckle down and tap their full potential. But flip reverse for me. I think for uni, that was particularly tricky because it's on you whether you turn up to lessons or not, how much you apply yourself or not, how much extra work you put in. There's no significant test. You can kind of work your way through the first year without any appreciable effort. But by the time the second and third year exams, are on the horizon, it's all down to how much effort you've put in. And I was fully willing to commit it. So my schedule, because I did a mechanical engineering degree, it was completely stark difference compared to a lot of my student buddies who would be doing 8-10 hours of lectures a week. We were doing 9 to 5 back-to-back lessons, labs. It was a busy degree. It was hard. And then you have to try and do some work on top of that. And then if you go and spend 2 weeks going to Norway doing some training with the Royal Marines Reserves, you come back, you've got 64 hours of lessons to catch up on. And the clock doesn't stop. There's still 32 hours of lessons a week going on. That is a significant amount of effort to try and play catch up from that. And then obviously I was spending every weekend running up and down hills or doing some kind of stuff. So I treated uni as as a full-time job almost. So the amount of discipline required to keep turning up to the lessons, do as well as I could, study, knuckle down, and then to come away with, luckily enough, I just scraped a 2-1, which is a good pass. But that was again, another lesson of if you apply yourself and really work hard to your potential, you can achieve some good things. So yeah, it was very much worth it, because several years later, having gone through flying training and being a frontline pilot, getting to live my dream, on reflection, all that effort, all that sacrifice, well worth it. Yeah.
Yes.
We're lucky.
I went through uni, I think I was 33. So,
big respect.
They called us like the mature students or whatever. But to be honest, I just felt like part of the class. I think I was still young at heart, but I got a 2-1. But looking back, I'd recommend to anybody who goes to uni, get hooked up with your lecturer, the one who's supposed to give you supervision, and really try to understand what it is they want from you. Because I had the knowledge, I had the academic skill to get a first. And this isn't sour grapes. I'm honestly not bothered. I couldn't believe I was getting a degree, to be honest. When I was a teenager, a degree was something you did if you were posh, your family were rich, and they could afford to put you through uni, plus you got grants and stuff back then. But I would hand in these long essays, and they're using all my experience from around the world and this kind of thing. And of course, as good as they were, it wasn't what they wanted. They wanted these learning outcomes, and they wanted you to demonstrate that you could hit these markers. And I went through 3 years of uni oblivious to all of that. I just didn't get it. So yeah, lesson there for everyone is just plug into the system and learn what it is, because it's a tick box exercise at the end of it. You've got to put the work in, but you've got to tick those boxes.
Very much so. What subject was that?
I did an access course in humanities. So that was psychology, sociology, biology, and I think it was human science or something. And my degree was youth and community work.
Wow.
Very
interesting. Yeah.
Well, it was good for me, Chris, because if you're a scholar of life, they're the subjects that you want to familiarize yourself. And if you basically know like Marx and Durkheim and these sort of philosophers and social scientists of years gone by, and it gives you like a good broad understanding of life, as opposed to if you sort of maybe study history, it's kind of, I'm not making sense, but it's in a sort of a groove, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So for me, because I did so mechanical engineering is maths heavy. It's pretty demanding, but it's quite a separate mindset, I would say, to get through a mech eng degree or any kind of technical degree or science degree than it is a humanities. So knowing that I did maths, physics, and chemistry A levels, and then I went on obviously to do a couple of gap years. Well, luckily enough, I had my place at uni because I just about did well enough to convince uni to hang on for my place for a couple of years. So during my gap years, I did a philosophy and a psychology module, one of each, from a degree in the local university, purely because I wanted to just get an appreciation of a humanities-based degree. And it was hard graft. I mean, obviously it's seminars, it's essays, and it is a different mindset. And I would echo what you just said earlier about that's where you need to link in and understand, get an appreciation from your tutor, your mentor, and then work to that. And that's pretty fundamental to success on a humanities-based course. Whereas a technical course, a little different. You just need to be able to nail the maths. You can solve the problems or you can't. And if you can't, more effort required.
Yeah, the good thing about humanities, and I went on to do a year and a bit of a social work master's, and again, so that's your sort of philosophy, a bit of philosophy, psychology, biology, this again, humanities. But a big part of those degrees are understanding the oppression in life and how the structures are set up to maintain the status quo that keeps the elite or the sociopaths and the working man, downtrodden, so to speak. And also anti-discrimination is a massive element that has to run through those professions, because as a professional, if you don't know you're being oppressive, then it's not a good, it's not a good place to be. If you're a youth worker and I don't know, you think it's fine to use this language about another color or something. But what I would say is it's like getting as far to the edge of the matrix as you can while still being in the matrix. You still, and to that end, I'm quite fortunate that I went that way. You can study medicine or law and be the top guy in the world in your profession, but you're still very much like in the matrix. It doesn't teach you to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And I was quite fortunate, really, that if I can call them, the events in New York happened 20 years ago, right bang smack as I started my education. And that again gave you reference points then with which to apply this knowledge you were learning and go, maybe the world isn't quite the way I thought it was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I literally just started Sandhurst. I was like 4 days into it when the 9/11 kicked off. So interesting times, and that obviously set everybody's mindset for the remainder of that 12 months on that course. Very focused on that shape the next couple of decades and up to this point. Pretty much all the old school Russian or the generic force doctrine kind of was put on the shelf, and then it was all desert ops, Iraq and Afghanistan stuff for the next few years, and obviously that pretty much that translated into the Apache force, which is where I spent the bulk of my army career as part of. Wound up doing 3 tours of Afghan, so 07, 08, 09. And we adapted to it pretty well. We're pretty good, but clearly that's flipped back to old anti-Russian stuff again, and that old school, almost Cold War, dusting that off, and going back to that mindset of lots of Russian tanks coming across the German plains and attacking.
Yes. So what was it they used to say? The Marines' key role was protecting NATO's northern flank, wasn't it? So to stop the Ruskies coming across the Norwegian Arctic, basically through Finland, I guess, or that sort of area.
Yeah, with style and panache and a lot of nudity.
And lots of women's dresses and getting drunk at weekends. The Russians, they occupied Afghanistan, didn't they, for what was it, good part of 10 years, if not longer. Sorry if I'm upsetting the historians.
Again, I'm not going to jump in there with masses of historical knowledge, but it was of that order, and it didn't work out so well. Just clearly backing up the fact that it's hostile terrain, and it's a hostile geographical terrain, yes, but it's the people, it's the warrior mindset, and you don't conquer it. It's a time.
When you've got a conscript force, obviously not everyone was a conscript, but a lot of the Russians were, and the same in Vietnam. You cannot match the mindset of a warrior who's dead set on protecting his homeland, and he will do anything, including give his life without a second thought to repel you as invaders. And he uses the lie of the land. He's imaginative with the weapons. He's got a funding source, which is generally going to be China or Russia, or Russia or America, so that they're getting sort of fairly sophisticated weapon systems. I mean, the Mujahideen had, was it Stinger missiles that could take down the was it the Hind helicopters that the Russians were operating?
That's right.
And the Russians just weren't prepared to go that far. They had their bases. They patrolled very regular sort of routes. They for a lot of their tactics was just bombing villages and stuff under the. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? But under the guise that the Mujahideen fighters were taking shelter there, but these guys could just hide in a mountain pass, and every time a chopper came over, don't think they had drones back then, but they would just blend into the mountainside, and that made them a formidable and unbeatable enemy.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the decisive factors is the attitude to life, though, and as you say, willingness to die for their country. There was a lot for what we could see for the times we were at in Afghan. It's that warrior mindset of treating life maybe slightly differently to how we value it in the West. We do not want to be seeing any casualties or any death amongst our own forces, and obviously there's a tragedy. We value life significantly. I don't think that translated to the same degree in the Afghan mindset, and more than a lot more willing to die for their cause. And I think that is such a huge advantage if you're trying to do operations, not invade, but work in a country where the mindset of the enemy force has got that mindset. That's a huge challenge to come up against.
Yes, and it was also that, I mean, if they got injured, so if they got fragged by a grenade or a round or a missile or whatever, that they'd have to travel for days on the back of a donkey just to get to any form of aid, any form of medical. And again, going into a battle, knowing that if you get tagged, that's going to be the outcome. It's it's a whole. Yeah, I mean, if one of our forces gets hit, chances are they're going to be on a chopper in 30 minutes, and within the hour they can be. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but within an hour they can be back getting medical attention, and within 48 hours they can be back in a state-of-the-art hospital in the UK.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, so that was the case when we were in Afghanistan, sort of 10 and a bit further back than that years ago, because obviously we got the luxury of air superiority. So there's no significant surface-to-air threat or air-to-air threat that means that you've got the freedom of manoeuvre to bring the medevac or casualty evacuation aircraft in. And even if there was enough of a threat that you bring that Chinook that was fully decked up, really impressive with a kit, come in and do that casualty extraction, you send a pair of Apaches to go and escort it with the ability to just put down fire, protect it, and do what you needed to do to clear its way in, offer enough overhead protection, and make sure it came back to the hospital. And you're absolutely right, that could be done comfortably within the golden hour, and and the casualty would then be able to go to an extremely swept up medical facility at Camp Bastion. And really impressive, all the people who work there, the equipment, it's about as cutting edge as you could get. So probably wouldn't have that luxury we wouldn't have that luxury if we were going to go up against a more sophisticated, better armed enemy that's got some kind of air defense system that makes it really tricky to have that ability to fly in, pick a casualty up and fly out without getting shot at the sky. So yeah, I wouldn't say that's broad brush anywhere we would deploy in the world. Probably third world nations, we'd still have the luxury of having that casualty extraction quick time by air. Doesn't translate if you Iran, Russia, any of the really sophisticated countries that we could potentially butt up against. We'd have to rethink how we're going to plan our casualty extraction timelines. But
yes, let's fingers crossed. Let's fingers crossed we don't have to plan.
Precisely. Yeah.
Plan that.
Agreed.
The Apache, mate, that is some bit of kit, isn't it? I mean, it even looks. It really looks the business, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a formidable concept. I mean, obviously, the attack helicopter concept goes back to sort of pre-Vietnam, came into being really with the Huey getting adapted into the Cobra to great success. But then the Apache was designed ground up concept, late 70s, came into being in the mid 80s in America as the Alpha model, and analog instruments and still optical sights and everything based in the front, and then that pretty much the same airframe, but with slightly upgraded engines, but with significantly upgraded avionics and slightly upgraded weaponry. That was the later evolution, and the crowning bit was having the longbow radar on the top, and we pretty much got a slightly different and slightly better version than the American version in the early 2000s. And the original plan was we were going to potentially go and have one Delta model, which was the command one with the radar on top and the ability to have the battlefield awareness of what was going on, and then have three or ratios of 1 to 3 of the less sophisticated but the weapon carrying missile cows, if you like, of the Alpha model that would be coordinated by the Delta model, would tell them which targets to go and prosecute, and they'd be the ones that would just carry all the weaponry and engage. But actually, as it came to pass, once people had made all the trials, made the decisions, things evolved, they decided that it was going to be better to go for 67, I think I'm correct in saying, all of the Delta model, the more sophisticated longbow radar equipped Apaches. So by the time they came into service about 2004 with the Army Air Corps, the first bunch of guys were coming through flying training on the Apache conversion when I was at the tail end of my pilot's course. So I timed it just great, more by luck than judgment. But at that point, you weren't able to go straight from pilot training onto the Apache. You had to go and prove yourself on another aircraft beforehand, and then once you had that little bit more experience, you could then come across. It was a big enough challenge to get through flying training in the first place. So firstly to get there and to be accepted on the pilot's course, and then the pilot's course itself, 18 months long, and you start with ground school. I've done a fair bit of sort of technical things in my mechanical engineering degree, so I found the ground school relatively straightforward. But again, still applied myself, worked hard, no dramas. Fixed wing, so you pretty much do the equivalent of a private pilot's license plus a bit more, and all on a basic fixed wing, so single prop, 2-seater. You learn the basics of handling the aircraft, a bit of instrument flying. There's only one night flying trip and a bit of nav. So really straightforward stuff, well before you get onto a helicopter, because it's cheaper. If somebody's having a bit of a stinker getting through that, then unfortunately it's savage, it's brutal. You get chopped, that's it. You're out. So working years of your life, going on a Monday morning with all your course mates, having done equally well or there or thereabouts with everybody else on all the trips up to that point, and then you could fail a trip that Monday morning, and you'd be go for a resit on the Tuesday. That doesn't work out. By Friday, you're off the course, never to fly again.
By Monday, you're with Ryanair.
Yeah.
Chris, can we just?
Yeah.
I'd be interested to put this little chat bit out as a clip because the Apache is going to fascinate so many people. Can we just stick on the technical aspect of the Apache for the time being?
Yeah.
And also your experience with it. I mean, what on the not the surveillance craft, but the actual attack one. What kind of I'm going to say guns. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say guns. Is that not technical enough? But
no, that's fine. Yeah,
what machine guns does that have on it?
So yeah, absolutely. Guns are the correct term, and all Apache pilots think of themselves as gun pilots. It is the aircraft is pretty much built as an armored flying fortress, which has got
gunship, isn't it? That's
gunship. That's absolutely it. It's got a 30 mil cannon, which that can obviously maneuver through quite an arc. So pretty much you can almost go vertically down, and you can sweep it through almost 180 degrees, so almost 90 degrees off to the left through to 90 degrees to the right. And you can basically operate that by either linking it to the camera. So you see it in the TV screen in the cockpit, and that's a really accurate, and that's probably the best way of operating. That's the equivalent of using a rifle looking down the sight, for a simple analogy. But you can also link it to whichever crew member's crash helmet and their helmet mounted display. So you've got a monocle in front of the right eye of both crew members, and you've got like a little green crosshair, and you can, wherever you move your helmet, whatever you look at, you can slave the cannon, slave the gun, so it moves to wherever you're looking at. And that is the equivalent of firing from the hip. So it can be done. It's for close in, very quickly, short range bursts for suppression, but not necessarily accurate.
Do you have to compensate with the aerodynamics when that thing goes off? Does it, is it trying to push the chopper back?
No, not in the same way that an A-10 would. So obviously, that's got such a formidable weapon that unless you're in a mega steep dive at full throttle, even then you've got to compensate for the fact that if you put in a massive burst, then you're going to be slowing the aircraft down. Doesn't affect it quite anywhere near as much as that. But what you do have to compensate for is if you're doing what I said with the latter, firing from using the information in your helmet mounted display to look at the target, that is on whoever's doing that, looking at the target and operating the trigger. It's on you to compensate for where those rounds are going, take into account the fact that you're moving, the target might be moving, wind, and all the other elements of aerodynamics. Whereas if we go with the preferred method, which is far more accurate, of using the crosshairs on your screen, the weapons processor takes care of all those calculations for you. So all you need to do is just use your cursor to line up the crosshairs and point your camera exactly where you want it. And then the weapons processor will make all the ballistic corrections. You don't have to think about aiming off or any of that kind of stuff. So it takes into account your relative speed, the wind velocity, and the movement of the target. And when there's a lot going on in the cockpit, you want to rely on that because you've got so many other things happening, listening to multiple radios, and you've got split-second decisions to make. You don't really want to have to be trying to offset for something that you could wind up putting rounds 100 meters away. Then you've got all the faff of trying to adjust on. You haven't got time for that. Split-second decisions. You want the rounds to be bang on target straight away.
How worried are you about a blue on blue? Oh,
right. Well, clearly that is everybody at that point, that period of AH force time in Afghanistan, that was a massive thing that was on everybody's mind, because it's so tricky to identify one tree line from another when you're looking at a screen and you're flying around in circles and you're trying to make split-second decisions. So the implications of a trigger pull against what you thought was an enemy position but turned out to be friendly is you just call a load of your own blokes. And that is, that weighs on your mind. That is big pressure. But you get around that by you're a crew of 2. You've got good familiarity with the area, and you just going to double check anything. And if there's any doubt, you're not going to fire necessarily directly into a tree line, which could or may not be where friendlies or enemy are. So you put in a witness burst in an open field next to it, and you'll say, right, from that witness burst, get the JTAC or whoever you're able to speak to on the ground and say, right, can you just adjust me on from that? Let's be absolutely certain I've just fired into a field which I think is 100 meters to your east. Can you confirm? And if the answer is yes, definitely, well, then we can just adjust on from that. So there are ways of getting around it. But of course, the other thing is, where you'd be plugging in relatively accurate grids and elevations into the weapons processor, and then that would automatically bring your camera onto the exact grid that you've been given. But even then, if somebody's having a bit of a stinker on the ground and they transpose a number and they don't necessarily give you the correct grid, or you have a finger problem in the cockpit and you accidentally put the grids in the wrong way around, there's all that read back. So you're double checking between the JTAC on the ground and yourself in the cockpit. And there's 2 of you in the cockpit, so you're both cross-checking. There's a number of checks that try and sweep up anything where there's potential for human error to have caused a blue on blue. And every time you do a weapons engagement, it's all recorded. And then when you come back from that sortie, it's all thoroughly debriefed. And everybody gets the lessons from that. So firstly, it's to ensure that what you did is legal and you use the correct rules of engagement, the correct weapon system, it comply with the law of armed conflict. And but also you get all the other guys, as many who are available from the squadron, to learn from just purely what the engagement was, how you've done it, how you could do it better next time, what would be a better approach angle, and so on and so forth. So, and then anytime any other platform had a blue on blue, accidentally dropped a bomb on a friendly position, whatever it may be, we'd all try and learn the lessons from that in the same way that anytime there's a crash, an aircraft from whatever fleet, maybe nothing related at all to an Apache, but whenever somebody, whenever there's been a big crash, you try and get all the benefits, all the knowledge, all the safety elements from that so that it doesn't happen, or you minimize the chances of that happen again across the entire airframe.
Did you have many choppers crash in theatre?
No, not many at all. Not Apaches. So a few Chinooks had a couple of rough landings, should we say, from enemy action. Because obviously when you're low and slow coming into and out of a landing site, you're pretty vulnerable to rocket propelled grenade attacks, or even a burst from machine guns. Actually, a couple of lucky hits, and you've potentially that's enough to cause damage that would cause the aircraft to crash. But nothing, thankfully, catastrophic. And guys, it was almost like more of a crash landing than a full crash. Guys had got away with it. Apache-wise, literally, there was one crash, and that was lifting out of one of the forward operating bases towards the north of the Helmand area. And the guys took off in strong wind against the wind, because there were a whole bunch of other aircraft for an op that were in front of them, which prevented them from doing the taking off into wind, which you needed at that point, because we're so limited for power in the Apache at that time. When you're full of fuel, full of weapons, we didn't have enough power to come to a free air hover. You'd have to fly. You treat it like a slow fixed wing, because you need that extra airflow to come across the disc. But these guys were kind of hemmed in on the landing site, so they had to do a crosswind departure, which was pretty tricky. And as they were kind of just trying to get the speed up, as they were crossing the threshold from the fence separating the in and the outside of the fob, massive dust storm, massive dust cloud. kicked up because it was obviously nice and dust suppressed inside the compound. As soon as they went out the other side of the fence, complete brownout, and it came in like that. So for 1 second they were just struggling away to get going, but could see perfectly where they were heading. And the next second, complete brownout, lost references, and crashed. But thankfully, both guys got out, no problem at all. And then the knock-on effect from that was, right, the entire force needs a little bit more training just to make sure that we can, if ever we're forced into that situation, which isn't the optimum way of taking off into wind, how do we best get around that? And it was about using the symbology and using some of the holds that the aircraft has, which is like a less sophisticated autopilot. And then there was some simulator training as part of the subsequent tours, just to make sure nobody had that happen again. And it didn't. Aviation's really good at, as you will have experienced yourself, finding the lessons, spreading them out to everyone needs to know, having a culture of safety so you can become better, safer, and learn the lessons across the board.
And how susceptible are you to getting shot down by small arms fire?
So we pretty much were operating above the threat band for small arms for the vast majority of the time, because the weather was good enough and because the air threat there was no significant air threat whatsoever. So obviously no enemy aircraft in Afghan to prevent us from maneuvering wherever we wanted. So for a couple of reasons, it made perfect sense to be up at 2,000 feet above the ground. Comms were brilliant, so we had the ability to be, pretty much perfect clear comms back to headquarters, back to the ops room, anywhere we were operating within Helmand. And to talk to the JTACs well in advance of where we needed to go, and also your visibility is really good. You can see, way ahead. It makes sensors and it makes your weaponeering a lot easier being stacked up at height. So there are many benefits, but of course you're sat above where the small arms fire. So guys firing up with AK-47s very unlikely to cause any significant damage, because also it being a built from the ground up armored helicopter with being survivable as part of its description.
Are the rotor blades, for want of a better word, bulletproof?
No, and a couple of guys had a few holes put through their blades, and but not by small arms. So this would be more Dushka or bigger machine guns. But in fact, one guy grabbed the bullet and just put it on his neck chain and just wore that for the rest of the tours that he did. But it's a really cleverly designed, tough bit of kit. The Apache design would would take considerably more than a couple of rounds through the rotor blades to make it fall out of the sky. There was a footage of an American one that had one of its engines shot by a surface-to-air missile, and it still managed to fly back to base safely. It looked like a proper write-off, but managed to land safely and the crew survived. So yeah, it was fine. But the times when we dropped below the threat band, or dropped below 2,000 feet and we were low level, we used to do that on the earlier tours. We'd sneak in for a run in low level. If we had, let's say we're going to do a deliberate ops with 2 Chinooks full of guys, about to go and do an assault on an area, well, to retain the element of surprise as long as possible, keeping low level, find as fast and as low as we could, and then right at the last minute, with the Apaches leading, they'd pop up, and then the Chinooks would come in and land on with the Apaches time and judged just right, would be high enough up that they'd be able to oversee the area and put down fires, but not pop up so early that they've just given the game away. And we used to do that on the earlier tours, and then it just became it was more risk than was tolerable. So even though it's an armored helicopter, yes, they were like, well, actually, you're better off just being at height and staying out of that threat band, And yes, I know you're going to lose the element of surprise slightly, but doesn't really matter. The fact that you're in the overhead and the Taliban can see an Apache, they're scared already, and they're pretty much probably going to go to ground. So where you've lost that slight element of surprise, you've actually gained safety of helicopter and a deterrent effect. So let's just keep it at that. And that made sense. Not as fun flying at 2,000 feet as being at treetop height, but hey, still you're there to do a job, not just have a laugh. So.
What was it like then the first time you had to put fire down? Was it like all the training that you've done over the years is now coming to fruition?
Yeah, absolutely. The training is incredibly thorough. So the Apache course is split into two, and the first course is about 7 months learning how to fly the aircraft. The second part is, again, about 6 or 7 months, is all about operating it. So lots of weaponeering, and there's even more time in the simulator than there is in the aircraft on that phase, because the weapon system is not just the cannon. You've got missiles, you've got rockets, and you've got to coordinate that with, you're not just firing sat in a hover. There's various different ways you can do running fire and firing, from coming off the wagon wheel and tipping in, and all the various different iterations of low level and high level, working with a partner, working with a wingman. So you've had significant amounts of training just to be the newest Apache pilot there. And then there's pre-deployment training, which we used to do out in America, in Arizona, just to get guys even more up to speed. Rather than doing more generic stuff, it was so representative of the Afghan deserts, being out in the States, and lots of wide open space. So having done loads of time operating weapons in the simulator, all the button presses and the complexity of knowing what to do in what sequence, you did live firing in America. And then even when you got into theatre, you did a little bit of live firing on the range before you even got out and flew your first mission. And then you'd be paired off with somebody who was an experienced operator. So as the most junior guy, you'd be flying, probably pilot to start with a commander who'd done previous tours, or if not, was an experienced guy. So in the very first tours, it would be guys with thousands of flying hours would be commanding the aircraft. So you would never it was never like Spitfire pilots in the Second World War, handful of hours, crack on. It was so thorough that you were pretty au fait with what button presses to make at what time. And then when you actually come to do that, the first engagement for real, it doesn't seem like a massive step away from what you've been doing already. And you're so focused on trying to get the correct things done in the correct order, because time is short. These things happen in the blink of an eye. You're busy enough that you're all consumed. So as the pilot, you've got to maneuver the aircraft into a position to fire. As the co-pilot gunner, who's actually the aircraft commander and the weapon system operator, if you like, you're so engrossed in trying to achieve the weapons release within the time frame that you've got, which is a matter of seconds, that you haven't got time really to dwell on what you're doing. And it probably takes quite a while, probably takes a few weeks to actually let it sink in what you're doing. But of course, when you first turn up in theatre, you're getting a period of handover. So the squadron that's been there for a while still has the reins for a couple of weeks, and you kind of just gradually blend in and get a feel. And there was a point where you'd either fly with one of the more experienced guys from the tour that's just about to finish, or you'd be a wingman for the experienced guy. So if an engagement was to happen, just let them crack on. You'd probably just follow in and watch and learn for the first couple of weeks while you did that handover phase. So it was never as sudden as perhaps you might think. It was all thorough and blended in. And the engagements were relatively simple compared to trying to be in the simulator in a Cold War environment, trying to whack multiple Russian tanks as you were getting lit up by various ground threats. This was actually, it was a bit more simple, but at the same time it was a bit more dynamic, because as I say, we didn't have the luxury of just being sat in a hover. Didn't have the power to do that. So you're flying around in a circle, and you've got to get used to looking at a TV screen or looking out the window and getting an appreciation of what it's like flying sideways on, or looking sideways to the target, and having the ability to then roll straight in off the wheel into an ability to attack. So you could fire off axis with the gun, but it would require a slight bit of maneuvering. But if you're going to put rockets or missiles in, you need to be pointing at the target pretty much. So plus whatever's happening on the target area, if we're talking about a couple of Taliban guys who are running around from one piece of cover to another, might pop out, change fire positions, move somewhere else. The time available for making those engagements is so small that you either you snap in and it works, or you got to reset and be patient and just accept. So quite a lot of times you just weren't quite in the optimum position to be able to make an engagement. But of course, with time and practice, you get very slick at it. Interesting times, but really satisfying.
Did you and your fellow air crew, was it a common discussion? What are we going to do if we get shot down in, I'm going to say, in enemy territory, but obviously outside of the base is all enemy territory. But was that a discussion that you had?
Yeah, a lot. Really interesting. The training was excellent for that. So again, in America, in Arizona, we'd go into a bit of crashed aircraft survival or post-crash actions on the range. So as a pair, it would assume that if you manage to survive the crash and you're there as a pair, you'd operate your survival radio. If you're a singleton aircraft, you need to get in air support as soon as possible to come pick you up where able. And then you either, we're in a scenario where you're immediately surrounded under fire. So we just pepper pot back with our own weapons. We'd have a short-barreled assault rifle and a pistol. And so you're going to work your way back to some kind of cover, and then hopefully have an emergency rendezvous. You could bring in either another Apache, in which case that's where that'll land on. You're going to hook on and just carabiner on the outside. So you'd be sat next to the cockpit, one guy either side. Or there would be another dedicated platform, Chinook or whatever it may be, to support helicopter come pick you up. But of course, there may be a period of time where you're on the ground, one of you or both of you is injured. You might not have the luxury of, you might be rolled over and stuck in the frame. So you might not be able to get out because it's inverted in the crash and you're dangling. In which case, of course, not a nice position to be in, and we're pretty much of a mind of, if we do get caught, we're going to have a torturous time and then a slow, painful death, and it's going to be pretty grim. So I don't think getting shot down was a massive bother for that many guys, because it's an armored helicopter. We're flying at height, and it was a low level of sophistication, and all the surface-to-air missiles that the guys had, we had defenses on the helicopter to counter that. But crashing because of an air-to-air, so at night, or if the weather was bad, or if there was a mechanical issue. So for example, one Apache, it took off and had a tail rotor failure shortly after takeoff. Now, these things happen, human error or mechanical wear and tear. In this case, not entirely sure how it came about, but there was a tail rotor failure, which, if that happens in a helicopter, this is a bad thing, because you cannot fly that helicopter any longer, because it'll just spin around and you're hitting the deck. So the guys flew it extremely well, did all the correct actions, and managed to land it on quite close to the base, and were immediately given ground support, and they survived themselves unhurt and managed to right the aircraft. I'll keep it as out of damage as possible, or undamaged as possible. So, but if that had happened well into the green zone, well away from any kind of immediate support, as a singleton, if you'd have survived the crash, then pretty much you've been surrounded it would have been grim consequences. So you would pretty much resign ourselves to the fact that we're just going to do whatever you can with your personal weapons and take as many guys out as you can before the inevitable happened. So yeah, you would talk about it, but you'd hope it would never happen to you. So yeah.
And what weapons did you have in the cockpit? What personal weapons?
Yeah, so it was an SA-80 with a short barrel that would just tuck into the seat next to you.
A shorter barrel.
Shorter barrel, yeah.
It's short enough anyway, folks.
That's right. So just because there wasn't enough space to have the full-length barrel SA-80 in the cockpit, and that worked fine. So you tuck that in next to you, and you'd have a pistol, as much ammo as you want to take with you. So a good few hundred rounds. You'd have a grab bag with a few more mags in it, and then a survival bag, go bag. If you're able to, if you happen to land somewhere benign and there wasn't any help made available immediately, at least with your go bag, you'd have potentially some food, some water, some shelter in there, and
you could take a good book.
Yeah, well, hopefully you wouldn't be up that long, but yeah, fair enough. Always worth having some wisdom.
These days, you could take a bloody device.
Put a Kindle in there.
HD movies or something.
Well, yeah, probably on the run. You wouldn't necessarily be thinking about that. That's fair. That's fair. So you're not significantly well equipped. It's not like you got a mini-me you can just grab out of the side pod and go and run with. So bare minimum. But of course, a lot of the time you operate as a wingman, so as a two-ship. So if ever one guy was shot down, the other could just swoop in, land on next to you, and you clip on and then escape. Sat clipped onto the side of the Apache. So
that brings me on to the next thing I wanted to ask you. I'm just writing down some time codes here. So is my old Oppo, I'm only going to refer to him as Colin because I don't know if he wants his name all over the internet. But when I served with him in the Northern Ireland conflict, he was a corporal. I gather that he went on to become, I think, RSM or at least CSM. But he was the chap that hooked himself up, I believe it's to an Apache, or it might have been one of the American choppers, and he went back into the conflict zone to basically grab hold of a dead Marine that had been obviously shot in a it wasn't even a contact. I think they attacked a compound, and in the process this Marine was shot dead. When they got back to base, or when they reorged, they realized someone was missing. And Cole volunteered to clip himself onto the side of the helicopter, obviously because there's no room in the cockpit or the cabin, or doesn't even have a cabin, and flew back and was able to recover this chap's body. Were you there at the time?
I wasn't there for that. I was just a little bit before the first tour that I did, but obviously, I've spoken to the guys, heard the stories, and pretty impressive stuff. Because that is fundamentally an emergency extraction technique for when guys are literally about to get overrun by the Taliban. You're going to land on next to them, and they're going to clip on, and so it's not the ideal way to be flying around. But that is an extraction method, certainly not an infiltration method. But in this case, that was probably the only option to go in and rescue the poor guy. And so, big respect. That can't have been a comfortable ride in for the RSM. For Cole, did you say? Yeah, I'm sure. Definitely a good dit for the grandkids, I guess. But that would have been probably a pretty uncomfortable and fairly emotional ride in, and then especially having to pick up the corpse of a poor lad who'd been killed, and then load him onto the side, and then extract. Yeah, it had been emotional times, but it proved that is an option, not necessarily a favourable one, but then at any point going forward, if ever the situation dictated, then at least we knew that had been done, and it could be done again in extremis. but never as a first choice.
It wouldn't surprise me if they probably went against HQ to conduct it, because it's not, to risk millions of pounds worth of chopper and 3 human lives, probably 4, because I'm guessing there was a second Marine involved. That's some call to make, isn't it?
It is, and I think the earlier days, and this was very early days of Op Herrick, it was noticeably more chilled out and noticeably less restricted in terms of what you're allowed to go and do, and and I don't necessarily, and risk, I suppose. Whereas it didn't take too long, a couple of tours into it, there was a noticeable shift change in how much risk or lack of risk appetite there was, and everything was properly risk managed. Every mission that you went on, you'd have a conditions check to decide whether or not it was worth risking, that amount of equipment, that number of lives, whether the benefit was worth, losing a few 40 million pound helicopters and some dudes on the way. And that, I think the scrutiny was cranked up as the tours went along. And I guess it was probably a combination of maybe not fully mention it to the headquarters that would be making the decision, I don't know, coupled with the fact that it was probably a little bit more of a relaxed culture for risk appetite at that time. But that very quickly dialed up.
It's exactly the sort of action that British forces would carry out without a second thought for their own safety, but exactly the same sort of action that the higher echelons would be like, nope. Kind of that's probably British military history going back to the First World War there.
Yeah,
my gosh, just amazing.
Yeah.
So let's just be a bit random here now, because I think you've told your story very, very well, Chris. It's fascinating. I hope, I'm sure our friends are finding it as fascinating as I am.
Well, thank you very much.
Wow, and you're very humble. This is the other thing about all the pilots that I've chatted with, are just so humble. And I haven't met, what you'd expect an RAF Hooray Henry doesn't seem to be there in the mix at all.
Very, very rare to find characters like that. I think, the stereotypes always interesting, and stereotypes kind of probably exist for a reason, because there are one or two guys who match up to that. But in the main, I guess what you'll find is everybody is super motivated, professional. It's been something that they've worked really hard for years to achieve, and it's been an ambition for years and years, just to become a pilot and be as good as professional as they can. But occasionally you get guys who are, just you describe as a natural pilot. So they're really, have got oodles of capacity. They never maxed out. They just, all the information that is chucked at you during training, which is significant. There's a vast array of information you've got to absorb and be able to cope with and reproduce. And for some guys, one or two, it just is no big deal at all, and they don't have to put any significant extra effort in. That's a rarity. Everybody really has got to put in a lot of graft, and as a result, you don't just cut around taking it for granted. You're like, this is hard work. This is my profession, and I'm willing to do the best I can at this. I think the other thing about it is, we're you kind of get used to an environment, and you don't say take it for granted, but it becomes the norm when you've done thousands of hours, or many hundreds of hours flying an aircraft in a particular combat operation or theatre of operation. You become so used to it, it's the norm. So to what might appear to somebody who's not had that experience for themselves to be quite exciting and pretty awesome, well, it is those things, but it almost is, it's like you're used to it. it's a daily thing, and you've spent so much time sat in a cockpit flying at 2,000 feet over the deserts of Afghan, looking at TV screens, talking on the radio. You're just completely, that's an environment you're so used to. Whereas, I can remember being on a mission where it's probably on my second tour, on my third tour of Afghan. We were on very high readiness, and on occasion there would be the AC-130, so the American Hercules, that just had pretty much every piece of weaponry that you can possibly imagine strapped to it, that would be the aircraft of choice for special force operations, that would go in and do the big high profile grabs of big hitter enemy guys. And they'd like to have that overhead because of what it enabled them to do for firepower. If it all turned ugly, they had more than a wealth of airborne gunnery that they could get amongst. And every now and again, that would be unavailable because it was tasked elsewhere or it was unserviceable. So the next best thing was getting a pair of Apaches. Obviously, very capable bit of kit, but the limitation of an Apache is its range and endurance. Whereas obviously a Herc, you can fly for hours and hours and be miles away from the operating base and bring it in from elsewhere. Whereas the Apaches were pretty much within a couple of hours flight of the base to have enough loiter time to make it worthwhile. Anyway, for whatever reason, one night, this Herc not available. So the best thing to do, it was a quick op, as a lot of SF ops are. So we'll take the very high readiness pair, and it was a night mission to go within about an hour's flight of Bastion. And there was going to be a big stack of aircraft. So we had UAVs up above the target area. So drones looking down at the target area, some armored, some not. And then above that, you had some jets with bombs ready to go, again with sensors. And then the Apaches at a couple of thousand feet for that close-in fire support and that airborne command and control. And then with the ability to, below that, a couple of Chinooks full of guys who were going to land on quite close to target and do a walk-in from about maybe 100 meters away. And then in addition to that, a couple of Sea Kings with snipers, with SF snipers on board. And you got all this massive package going on. It's night. It's an SF op. It's fast. It's high profile. You rock up. It's midnight, and you get established in the stack. You got eyes on. There's all the radio chatter going on. Then a couple of minutes later, Chinooks come in. You watch it with your camera. So they land on just short of the target. All the guys get out. You can see the ultraviolet or the IR strobes go in. You watch all the guys stack up and then leg it towards the compound. And then they're in the compound and they're doing their thing. And we spend the rest of the time just flying around, just listening for sit reps. Is anything kicking off? Looking into close in and slightly further away if there's anybody likely to come out of the tree lines and start doing a counter attack against these guys. But of course, nothing happened. No movement. It was completely pitch black. No one kicking about. Actually, after 2 hours of flying around in circles after that initial wave of coming, I'll be honest with you, quite boring. But you can't really explain to somebody who's not really been in that environment that actually that sounds really cool. Well, by the time you've done it a bunch of times, actually it's one of the most dull sorties I've ever done. I remember thinking
is it as boring as putting in a 12-hour ambush?
Well, similar. It's not quite as boring as that, but it's the same mindset. It's like you think of all the things you've got to do to get into position in the first place. You probably didn't have enough time to write your orders, deliver the orders, shake out. You probably had you're on your toes just to make it, to get in position on time. So all that rush to get there, and then all of a sudden, you're right, 12 hours of sat around trying to stay awake. Exactly the same sort of situation here, but trying to explain that to somebody who's not sort of experienced that, it's like, well, actually, that sounds amazing. What a cool job! Well, it is awesome, but it's not quite as cool as you think it is sometimes. But actually, I don't want to play down how much effort it is to get to that point in the first place, for one. And secondly, I think all the different roles that we had in Afghan days, in our Peric days, the one that was the most rewarding by far was very high readiness, going to support troops in contact, where this was guys going out on patrol and just having a stinker, getting pinned down, maybe losing a couple of guys, so there'd be casualties, and they'd be outnumbered, outmaneuvered by a whole bunch of aggressive Taliban. And then you can tip up very quickly by being good at what you're doing, having the ability to get there quickly and very quickly tip the balance in their favor. Now that was exciting. It was dynamic. There was no planning. It's just completely reactive. You've got to be on your A game. Your concentration level is really high because you haven't had time to soak up imagery, do lots of 2 days worth of planning cycle, send UAVs up to saturate the ground. From general flying knowledge, you may have flown over there quite a few times, but you may never have been to that particular location. So you got to rock up, and you've got a JTAC who's talking up to you, but also trying to find out what's going on with a commander on the ground, and be that link between the two of you. So you're trying to extract as much situational awareness from talking to the JTAC, and couple with maybe a little bit of your own knowledge if you have any. But if not, everything is done looking through your cameras at your TV screen, trying to ascertain where the friendlies are and where the enemy are, and comes back to that blue on blue thing. You've got to do everything you can to avoid blue on blues or civilian collateral damage, and make sure you can target only the enemy. And then you're only going to get a fleeting glimpse of where they're just running between cover or firing, just coming out from the side of a building, putting down a couple of rounds, legging it somewhere else, using trenches, tree lines, whatever else. The workload, it's like that. You're working so hard, but when you get it right, you've saved lives from guys who are getting pinned down. You've got the ability to bring in the medevac Chinook, because you can see what's going on with the rest of the ground situation. You're able to put down suppressive fire to minimise the threat to that helicopter, and then you can get that casualty away, and you can hopefully allow the guys to regroup and either outmaneuver the Taliban or just withdraw to some kind of cover, reconstitute, and then go again. So without a shadow of doubt, that was the most satisfying and but the hardest role to fulfill.
Just sounds like the stuff of films, doesn't it? Well, not to you, but to us, the uninitiated. Blimey.
Yeah.
It's
But that was a privilege, it really was. And the responsibility, though, if you make a wrong call, if you're not quite on your A game, and you just don't take advantage of that couple of seconds where you could put down some accurate fire, then your guys are still vulnerable. And just because you weren't quite as slick as you needed to be, then your guys are still potentially going to catch it up. So yeah, it was enormous privilege, but also it's extremely hard work at times, but very satisfying when you got it right. So
I bet. Well, we're going to come on, Chris, and talk about your racing and your company, but we're going to talk about flying in general, won't we?
Yeah. So I've seen that you went to America and got your FAA license.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a plastic pilot isn't the right word, but I was quite chuffed that if you pass your private pilot's license in America, you get it for life. So I've got my little license over there somewhere with I think it's got my photo on, I can't remember. And it's a lot of stuff I do, Chris, is a bit like what we said earlier. I do it because I don't want to die and say that I hadn't done it. And when I was a little lad and I saw aeroplanes flying over, I would just think, wow, it would be great to fly one of those one day. I don't know if everybody thinks that, but I certainly did. And this is how I always sell myself on my ventures. Is it comes from, it might be watching a film, or I mean, I watched Point Break, the original Point Break, when it came out, gosh, 20, 25 years ago, or whenever it was. I mean, who couldn't watch that film and not want to go skydiving?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, I've got to do that. So I just put them on what I called a back burner in my mind. And then it's like that thing, set your goals, dream big, and then the universe gives it all to you.
It certainly does. Yeah.
You know, as long as you're prepared to recognize the opportunity and go, yeah, now's my time. Let's go for it. And I've done the same for whatever it might be, you know, running the London Marathon, running the length of the country, backpacking through every single country in the Americas. I mean, that comes off the back of reading adventure books when I was a kid, reading about people catching piranhas in the Amazon. So when I actually finally caught a piranha in the Amazon, which to some people might just be catching a fish, no, to me, it's just the most, can't think of the word, the fullest experience I could ever have. It just means so much to me that yeah. I read about this when I was maybe 12 years old, and now I'm living it. I'm you know, a little dream like that's come through and come true rather.
I mean, isn't it amazing to do that? To when you know, I remember being sat in a classroom trying to knuckle down and listen to what the teacher was saying, and just daydreaming of being flying up in the clouds and whizzing around. But when years later, when it actually happens, it's such an accomplishment, such a feeling of accomplishment. It's like, I've put years and years of my life working towards that point. When it actually happens, it's just incredible. Yeah. So I understand, I appreciate where you're coming from. But I imagine with the same with flying, you know, when you went and did your license there, was it what you felt at the time? Was that feeling worth all the years of of dreaming about it?
Oh gosh, it was. I can't actually remember what the tipping point was that made me go into a shop, buy a copy of Aircraft Weekly or Pilots Weekly or whatever it was called, and go down the adverts in the back of the magazine and find a flying school. But I think I was at university at the time. It was quite funny, actually. We came back from our first year of uni and we were sat in the lecture room, and there was, I don't know, 30, 35 in our class. And the lecturer came in, "Hi, folks, welcome back for, the next semester." I think they started calling it semesters then. Ridiculous, but that's what they did. And he said, "So, right, can we just go around the class one at a time? Just tell us what you've been up to on your leave, right?" So the first guy says, "Me and the missus went to the beach." The next person is, watch videos. The next person is, we had barbecues. Maybe the next person is, we had a week in, Spain or somewhere. And when it got to me, I can't remember what he said, but I wasn't going to say that I backpacked through every country in the Americas that I'd not yet backpacked through, which some of the flights I got were so small that when the stewardess, I think it was, or the person on the airport desk heard me say I was a pilot just because I just passed my test, they said, "Oh, would you like to sit up front with the pilot?" So I sat up front with the radio headphones on and everything, flying into the Amazon jungle. It was just amazing. I didn't mention that I'd backpacked all these countries. I didn't mention that I'd spent a day with Che Guevara's former commander on Cuba, right? I didn't mention that I just got my pilot's license, and then they lent me a plane so I could fly up the coast to a place called Sebastian and do skydiving for 3 weeks to get the skydiving license. There was a whole load of there was a whole load. In basic, my 3 months leave, I just packed it with just bucket list, bucket list, bucket list, bucket list, dream, go, go, go. But yeah, that was it. And that was the summer. For some reason, I thought I'd finally learned to fly. Like I said, I don't know what actually triggered it. I picked the cheapest flight school I could find. It was an English magazine, but this one was in the States, which stuck out from all the others. And when I phoned the guy, it was an English chap that promoted this flight school over there in Florida, so that when he went over every year, he just got free use of the Cessnas over there. So I called him up. He said, "Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Ernie. Ernie runs the school," and that's it. Next thing, you're booking a ticket to, I think it was Orlando I flew into, or Miami. Yeah, I spent the day drinking with homeless Vietnam veteran or former Vietnam veterans on Miami South Beach before this guy picked me up, took me to the flight school. On the way, I said, are there many alligators in Florida? You know, I've been quite naive, Chris, most of my life, and I still am incredibly naive now. And he went, "Alligators?" He just literally pulled the car into this lay-by. It was a roadside diner or something, and there was this river. I was going to say creek, but it's probably a bit bigger than a creek, packed with alligators just swimming up and down. It was a Hells Angels type motorbike gang drinking, but they were all ex-Marines, and they're all going, "Yeah!" And it was like they were cheersing their victory in Vietnam. I didn't like to tell them that you guys didn't win. Just an incredible experience. I couldn't believe that after flying for just 11 hours, they give you an aeroplane and you can fly solo. That was just, again, it's just all part of the experience, Chris, you know, just all part of the, oh my God, how lucky am I? You know, just living my life. And yeah, that was it. I think I did the 3-week course, and then I think I paid for another 7 hours of lessons because the guy hadn't explained to me the aerodynamics behind landing, right? The instructor I had was absolutely awful, the worst. In the end, it was almost at punching stations. Wow. And I just turned around him in the cockpit one day and just laid into him verbally and said, "You are fucking useless. I'll demand some more hours." So they gave me, I think, another 7 hours for free. Wow. And what I'm saying there is, I didn't know, because no one had ever explained it, that when you're coming in to land in an aeroplane, you're landing on a cushion of air, and that cushion is created between the wings and the ground. What you're not doing is a sort of Dukes of Hazzard thing where you're going and just diving into the airfield, which is what I just assumed did. I thought you just pointed the aeroplane down and you came in, and it might sound silly to folks, but he's there trying to teach me in his mind without explaining what it is he's actually thinking. So I was slamming that Cessna down. And it was only because when I went back to the flat that I rented, the apartment I rented with this Austrian guy, who funnily enough had just failed his test, he looked at me and said, "Did he teach you how to land?" I was like, "No." He said, "Yeah, me neither. This is how you do it, right?" And as soon as I realized that you're not pushing down, you're feathering back, if that's the right expression, to sort of it's like a swan, isn't it? Coming into land, it puts its wings out and it's stopping the air, and then it gently comes in on that cushion that's created. And after that, I was fit for the red arrows, Chris. Yeah,
Very
I
low.
just could put that plane down on its two wheels without putting the nose wheel down, wheelie down the runway, and then do what they call a go around. So just take off straight again without touching the nose wheel down. And when I passed my test, yeah, it's just a lovely accomplishment. You know, I don't know how much I'm ever going to fly again. I would do it today if I was a millionaire. But to fly in the UK, if you get the weather window and pay £150 for 40 minutes, maybe that I'll earn that sort of money one day in my life, but I certainly don't earn it now.
Yeah, that's fair. And I guess it's about the type of flying you do as well. Flying it's about freedom, but it's also about, for me, I like going fast. I like the rush of seeing the ground whizzing past outside the cockpit. And ultra low level is when you get that real sense of speed. And I like, obviously, any type of flying. Fixed wing's great, but in a helicopter, I'd say in a Gazelle, which is a big bubble canopy, it's like being a little magic carpet, nipping around, you know, mega low level, hedge hopping, snipping over trees. And yeah, you don't even have to be doing much more than 100 knots, but because you're close to the ground, that sense of speed is really there. Probably about as much fun as it can be flying. Awesome. So you're right, you don't often get the opportunity to do that in the UK as a military pilot, let alone as a civilian, because obviously, you know, you're not necessarily allowed to be that low level. But I'm sure out in the States or abroad, where the weather's good, the flying is cheap, and they're a little bit more chilled out with rules and regs. Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah, it was that thing, because I was doing it. I know people get upset when you use the term bucket list, but because I was literally doing it for the experience. I didn't mind flying in the States under the FAA as opposed to the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority. And like I said, just really wanted the experience. Had I learned to fly in the UK, we would have been talking probably 10 to 20 times the money that I spent. We would have been talking phone calls all the time. Sorry, Chris, can't fly today. Or, you know, your flight's changed to this afternoon. Oh, sorry, we're going to have to cancel just because of the weather. The rules are much more stringent, if that's the right word, in the UK, much stricter. And that's obviously a good thing. The airspace is a lot less. So there's a chance of you're going to meet other traffic. So it has to be a lot safer. The British standard, it's a bit like the scuba diving. The British standard is just higher and slightly more complex, the learning than the American equivalent. And I always had the option to convert my license when I got back. But like I say, it's just too much money.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll get you up in one of our helicopter experiences sometime soon. That would be.
I'd love to.
Yeah, that's a year or two down the line, but that's the aspiration.
That would be brilliant. Yeah.
Attack helicopter profiles, but open up to any civilian customers you want to see what.
Yeah, I'll have GoPros. About 30 I'll have like a bandolier of GoPros strapped to me. That would be excellent.
Yeah, well, that'd be cool.
So racing driving, you don't do things by halves, do you?
True enough. I think by the time I'd done 3 Afghan tours on the Apache, it was amazing. It was such an awesome thing to be able to do. But I was at the point where I was going to kind of promote out of a cockpit role and into a staff job. So I approached the Air Force and said, like, can I just come across the Air Force and carry on flying? And actually it was really easy, and they were very good about it, and just let me come straight across, did a bit of training and carried on, and spent the best part of 8 years doing flying at a relatively chilled level, so that I had capacity to then go and do other things. So about that sort of time, I'd met my now wife, So it was the first time I pretty much had a life, because it was amazing being out in Afghan or preparing for going out to do an Afghan tour, but it was a full-time life. It literally was, there was no capacity to do anything else. Whereas what chopping across the Air Force enabled me to do, as well as have capacity to have some, get married and have a bit of a life, it gave me the time to go and do motorsport, which I've always been passionate about. And I was never looking to do it as a professional, just being a pro racing driver, and that's it, at the expense of all else, but just for the sheer enjoyment of it. Probably similar-minded to you, as much as I like ticking boxes, but that was a box I really wanted to tick properly. So rallying and racing both massively appealed to me. So luckily enough, what going across the Air Force gave me the opportunity to do is to have the capacity to go and compete in both. So bought myself a rally car, got my rally license, started competing, likewise with racing. And then eventually I did enough to become an instructor. So I then did my instructor test, and then worked as a rally instructor for a few years at a rally school, just in my spare time, fitted in around the last few years of Air Force service. And then, but I did exactly the same ditto with racing as well. So, bought a racing car, got my license, did a few seasons of racing, then went down to Thruxton race circuit, relatively close to where I'm in Reading, and then became an instructor. I still work there part time, and it's just great fun. So, but I'm not teaching professional racing drivers how to be quicker. I'm just giving an experience of people who've not been on circuit or not done much time driving around a race circuit before. I can give them the benefit of how they need to position the car, racing lines, and optimize the performance of the car. So that's really cool. But all that enabled me to prepare for what I want to do with my own business. So the main reason, if you don't mind me just slightly changing subject here, it all leads into one of the key reasons I left the Army Air Corps, went across the Air Force to give me that capacity, was to prepare slow time into creating my own business, which was the ultimate personal tick box of all the cool things I really wanted to do, that I've been very lucky to do in my military career, mainly in the Army, but also then later on in the Air Force, plus throwing all my favourite civvy hobbies and just put it into a series of little packages that like-minded guys wanted to come and be part of the team and instruct on, and like-minded customers want to come and do, because it's going to be a great fun day out for them, or just really enjoyable, or they want to have those skills developed in themselves for a professional capacity. So I pretty much, with a blank sheet of paper, I said, right, what would be the coolest things that I could pull together out of what I've done in the military? And I was like, right, and other things. If I could do whatever I wanted, there'd be some rally driving in there, there'd be some racing, there'd be attack helicopter profiles. We'd throw in, there'd be some skydiving. We'd put in a bit of stuff you see on Mission Impossible, Top Gear, James Bond.
Some weapons.
Some weapons, yeah. A little bit of close protection type stuff. A little bit of sort of counter-terrorism, policing or SF type stuff. I just pull all these things together, and then you find, as you mentioned already, if you want to do something and you've got a passion for it and you believe in it strongly enough, people just start appearing. So all my muckers from various elements of the armed forces and from racing instructing and rally instructing, all just it all slots into place, and they guys with all the specialist expertise I don't necessarily have to a great level myself, but these guys do, because I'm a bit of a dabbler. I want to be doing all these different things. I'm such a box ticker. But having somebody who's a specialist as a rally instructor, who is a pro rally driver, who's been, so one of our guys who instructs for my company, for V-Force, is the youngest ever junior British rally champ, and he's done lots of professional rally. extremely talented guy, excellent instructor. So he's the guy that will be teaching people how to do rally driving. No, yes, I can teach to a basic level, but yeah, I want people who are really, really passionate about and capable and really good at what they do in their niche. But equally, if you have that exact same philosophy from everyone in the team who's got their own specialist niche, then you've got a really good vibe, you've got professional credibility, and we can pull together just a buffet of all the coolest things you could just imagine, all wrapped up in the same sort of package. So that's where I'm at. I did the motorsport stuff because I love it, but also to just go and do, when I'm doing evasive driving packages, I'm basing it around rally driving, but there's more to it. There's explosions, there's guys shooting munitions at you. There's a car chase scenario of a bunch of bad guys chasing after you. Yeah, it's about as good as it gets. It's like driving through a movie set. And I just thought, if I can do this with credibility, with good quality, then I'm just going to have a blast doing things that I enjoy doing, and with other people who love it just as much as I do. So
let's give your company name, V-Force, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. V-Force vehicles, Vosper, surname Vosper. V-Force obviously was a big part of Air Force, life in the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But actually, maybe you didn't know this. I didn't know it initially, but it was also a UK Special Forces unit in the Second World War. But I just thought I didn't want to call it the Chris Vosper Rally School or the Chris Vosper Tactical Driving School. That just didn't sit well with me. So it needed to be something that was vaguely hinting at military. But
it's an awesome name, mate, and your emblem or logo is very, it's something exciting is going to go on. There's going to be lots of people wearing black.
Yeah, well, that's the plan. And I think if you can be 4 up in a black attack helicopter, civilian but notionally attack helicopter like an Augusta 109 or a Twin Squirrel, you put your mate in a black Subaru rally car replica, send him firing around a massive gravel rally stage, and then you get to go and chase him down in the helicopter and then do a vehicle interdiction. So similar to all the cool stuff, the very best bits that we were doing on Apache, but with a lot less of the planning, the restrictions. Of course, when you're as a military guy, especially in the flying world, you've got to be as efficient with that airframe as you can. There are budget restrictions. The taxpayer doesn't want to see you just going on jollies. You've got to prepare as much as you can for being good on operations. And the penalty for that is you've got to be super careful with your planning and use every minute of flying time to be good at skills. However, doing it for fun, as we're doing in V-Force, none of that comes into to play. It's about, provided you're able to justify the cost, which clearly there's no cheap helicopter flying out there, but we can just purely put the emphasis on doing the very fun and only the fun bits without having to worry about stacks of planning or being efficient with our budget for skills.
Did you say the helicopter bit's yet to come?
It's yet to come, because that's a significant amount of development beyond where we're at the moment is delivering driving experiences, which have a variety of everything's in 2 dimensions, but we've got a different bunch of disciplines, different bunch of types of car, and we can apply different tactical scenarios to everything we do, and that's shaping up very nicely. To then step up to throwing in helicopters, and that is the amount of background admin required to get authorization from the Civil Aviation Authority, get all the profiles safe but fun, requires a significant amount of trial, research and development work. Because what I don't want to do is have something that's like completely sterile and benign, where you're doing 2,000 feet. It's like, okay, well, it's cool, but it's not exciting enough. Equally, we don't want to be so reckless that we're going against, CAA regs, or we're endangering the lives of the customers or pilots. So it's making it within the bounds of safety and regs as cool and as fun and as enjoyable and memorable as possible. And I think to do that justice takes a bit of time and effort. Plus, the other thing is it's not just about helicopter flying, and that's all we're offering. We want to be having a buffet of various different cool things that people can choose from, and it's going to be preference and frankly budget dependent, because you can drive a Subaru rally car for a few £100 no problem. When you involve helicopters doing really specialist stuff, you got to add a zero, and that is a tiny market. So I'm not pitching that as our main thing. That is a bolt-on that's going to appeal to a couple of % of people who've got a lot of disposable income and want to do something really, really cool, where time is of the essence, money is not. But for the vast majority, I guess that's probably a little bit out of financial reach for the time being. What would be really nice, and the longer term view, is to become nice and successful and profitable, that we got the ability to do some charity stuff where we could offer up hopefully the odd little place here and there for free as a reward for people, or raffle off for charities. And obviously, there are many good people doing many good things, and it'd be nice to support. So, longer term aims: be successful, have a great time in the meantime, but be in a position where we can do a bit to help others as well.
Yeah, well, perhaps we can chat about that after the podcast, because I've always got a few charity irons in the fire, and during this veterans crisis mental health crisis that we're currently in, it's not just veterans. It's obviously a lot of people aren't very well at the moment, but veterans seem particularly to be taking their own lives. So
I know, tragic. It's such a shame. It's just such a waste. So I obviously, as you can appreciate, I'm fortunate we're linked in with some really great guys who are part of the team, instructing or staffing at V-Force, and vast majority are either ex-military or former military or still serving. So very much want to be able to, whatever we can do, support veterans.
Yes,
all for it.
Yes, I look forward to chatting to you about that, because I feel quite excited now. I've got a few ideas.
Fantastic.
I was going to say, Chris, it sounds like one hell of a stag do, doesn't it?
Yeah, but
without the alcohol, and you can drink in the evening, but
that's right. Yeah,
lock up sober.
I mean, that's the idea of it. If it's a pretty decadent stag do, but a memorable one. So I'd hope that
I checked out your prices. They're very reasonable, unless I misunderstood something. I mean, around the £250 mark.
Yeah, I think it is reasonable, and that's obviously there's just a little bit more than that, but to allow for a bit of a forces discount or an emergency service discount, or wherever we can, just offer up a little bit of a discount. But you kind of got to make the balance between covering the costs, which are fairly significant, to lay on good quality training evolutions with plenty of time in the driving seat with a really good instructor. As we've discussed before, if you've got an idiot of an instructor, just totally sours the taste in it. But if you've got somebody who's really passionate and skilled and knowledgeable what they're doing sat alongside you, it makes a big difference. So to start with, probably right, sort of the 250, 300 quid mark for a really compelling, really awesome, and pretty much I'd say unique experience of it. To me, that seems very fair. It is a fair bit of money for somebody on a relatively average wage, yes, but what's the trade-off? You're doing something amazing. So, I guess in time, we'll probably make it a bit modular and make the additional bits modular, so you could pay for extra cool things. on top of the stock standard. But for most people, just doing, a full-on 4 hours of really intense driving that they won't have done before is enough and really cool. And that's as far as we want to be fair about it. Don't need to be greedy, but at the same time, it is a business. So when we can get profitable to a really good degree, that opens up a bunch of opportunities to do other great things.
Yes, well, it certainly sounds like an amazing experience, and like I said, that doesn't sound expensive to me at all. I'm sure there's far more expensive days out that you can have to pay for if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we talk about the nitty gritty of driving then? Because
yeah, sure.
I was going to use an example then, but it will get me in trouble with the police.
So it's just imagine it was your friend, or
let's just say I had to flick something on in the car the other day, and the guy that was with me went, "I'd rather you didn't do that." And I said, "No disrespect, but I grew up in the Southwest, like in the sticks. If you can't flick a switch while you're driving, the way we look at it is you probably shouldn't be in charge of a motor car."
That's fair enough.
But it is. I mean, I came from that era where your dad drove you back from the pub. He was pissed, which is just what people did back then. He'd have a pint of beer between his knees, rolling a cigarette, changing radio 1 to radio 2 with his, or radio 2 to radio 1 for the top of the pops with his elbow, waving at his mate, the policeman, as he drove the other way, right? Okay, I'm slightly exaggerating, but that was the 70s for you.
Multitasking, yeah.
So I like to think of myself as a competent driver. It's not something I'd ever say to anyone, for the simple reason, whenever anyone says, "I'm a really good driver," they're always the worst. Right. But I mean, we threw cars around as kids, as teenagers. I'm almost surprised that any of us are still here, right? But then again, that's also testament to the fact that we kept them on the road most of the time. But when I see that thing on Top Gear,
yeah,
where they put the celebrity in, was it the reasonably priced car? And then they say to me, "Where do you think you come on the board?" I honestly think I'd just be like, at the top. Although I'm more than willing to admit there's a lot more to performance driving than what I know. Of course there is, right? But do you ever? Where would you come on that leaderboard then, Chris? If you were to drive that reasonably priced car?
I'd like to think somewhere near the top. Yeah, I think I'd be pretty happy with that. I think I've probably got the advantage of having spent a bit of time on circuits, on racetracks, and when you're used to an environment, you're more comfortable, you're more competent at that skill. And yeah, it depends who else I'd be up against, but compared to celebrities who haven't really done any significant racing or done lots of time on the track, then it's almost cheating, isn't it? So yeah, I'd like to think I'd probably be at the top of the board or towards the top. But if I was to compare myself against like the ex-Formula One drivers, or the guys who even Lewis Hamilton did that, didn't he? So I think I'd still be there'd be a bit to push to catch up with those guys. But I'd rather be comparing myself to those dudes, because it's like that's where you want to aim. You're talking about the very best guys at what they do, and if you could get within a second a lap, or comfortably within a second a lap of Lewis Hamilton's time, that's the target. That's where you want to be. So yeah, I'd like to see that's a fair comparison. And if you're running with a top pack, then even if you're the last, you're still making progress. So, but yeah, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, who's the sort of work? Do you get many really bad drivers come on? Are there some people that just haven't got it?
It's an interesting thing. So I like the psychology of skill acquisition, of learning fine motor skills, of learning how to do something for the first time and then develop it to a good standard. And I think some people have a bit more of a natural aptitude to acquire certain skills than others. But in the same way that some people have probably got more physiological tendencies or advantages than others. But I think your attitude to how much you apply yourself, what your mindset and your motivation is, has a big bearing on how much you're willing to develop. I think people who are struggling to or don't perform particularly well probably don't necessarily think of themselves as being capable of performing particularly well, for one, aren't particularly interested, and are not motivated to up their game much. They just they've got an experience day to come and have some fun, and it's been bought for them as a present. So a few laps going around a race circuit is a real tick in the box novelty, but it's not necessarily part of a program of development that they want to go through. So I think that's probably the overriding factor. But some people just seem to struggle a bit more than others. So some people just, they'll just gel with the car and be able to comfortably, understand the little bits of instruction. And I suppose that's the other bit, is people having the capacity or willingness to learn and absorb instruction. Because some people are just tense, they focus on what they're doing. When you're maxed, or starting to max out, one of the first things to go is your sense of hearing, isn't it?
Massively.
So you'd be offering instructions like, for example, brake hard because we're going fast into a slow corner, and if you don't, we're going to crash, and there isn't another pedal on my side, so you're the one doing the braking. Too maxed out to listen. So we're almost on occasion quite close to physical intervention. You need to press that brake pedal, or we're both going to wind up in that Armco hurt. So, but that doesn't happen that often. Most people, if you're a good instructor, you're going to try and put people at ease, and at least you're going to build up to a position where they nibble at the edge of their comfort zone, but you're always doing it safely. So I'd rather have somebody who's really struggling go a bit slower, and it's not necessarily the pace of the car, it's the pace of events. It's have they got the ability to think ahead, listen to instruction, and absorb the critical instructions of how much you need to brake and when. But also, so that's on a race circuit. Rallying, you're going to need to use some power when it's counterintuitive to hold the slide and prevent you from spinning out or sliding off into danger. And that is probably the trickier bit, because it's when instincts kick in that you need to, if somebody's got a mindset, and this military guys are really good at this, is you can override your instinct to an extent because you're used to instructions and that discipline of, I say jump now, you jump out of that aircraft or whatever it is. Whereas not everybody's had that life experience or that ability to override their natural instincts for survival, which, even if logic is saying, I need to listen to what this instructor's telling me because it makes sense, I'm just going to lift off the accelerator. I think I'm going too fast mid-corner. Whereas actually the car would have gone around just fine, but that very act of aggressively lifting off the accelerator because you just had a bit of a panic has actually caused the car to spin.
Yeah.
Little things like that. So, to people, there is a huge range of abilities of start states when people get in the car, but it's always nice to be able to give a really noticeable amount of progression. So even if somebody started as a relatively low standard of driving, if you can help develop a certain aspect or see significant improvement, even if that end state isn't particularly high, well, that's great, because they come away feeling a sense of accomplishment. You come away as an instructor feeling a sense of accomplishment, and you know that if ever they want to continue, well, you've just moved the bottom rung, a notch up. So next time they come back to do a bit more, you can develop them a little bit further, and everybody's going to develop at a different rate. And I think with enough time, effort, patience, and certainly, unless you're doing it professionally, money, how much money you're willing to throw at something to get good at it, then you can master any skill. But I guess motivation is a big factor, isn't it? So yeah.
Yes. I just imagine myself burning around that track. I mean, when they leave the line on Top Gear, I'm talking about now, I'm just thinking first gear, red line, second gear, red line, third, fourth, down into third for the corner, foot to the floor. Is it understeer or oversteer? I don't know the
when it's pushing on. Yeah,
pushing on.
Yeah, that's
pushing on.
Understeer.
Just got it. You just know if any more you're going to slide off, any less, and you're going to lose speed. But you reminded me of something then when you said about the selective hearing. When you're under pressure, it's the first thing to go. When I was on my my para course, or my second para course, I should say, we'd done a jump from the Herc, and the wind was about the maximum it can be for safety. And I was coming into land, and I was coming in. The wind was carrying me quite fast, so I pulled down on the lift webs to slow myself down. And all I could hear from the ground, from one of the instructors, was, "Number 7, let up. Number 7, let up." And I'm coming down thinking, "Number 7, you freaking idiot. Number 7, let up." Glad I'm not number 7. Anyway, when I smacked into the ground harder than I think the human body is possible, I think I just pushed it to the edge of the envelope of not killing myself, right? Knocked myself unconscious. The first thing I thought when I woke up was, "Oh yeah, I'm number 7, aren't I?" The instructor's brother, "Why didn't you let up? What?" I just I was so focused on the task in hand, I couldn't really do the two things at the same time. So yes, my gosh.
Well, that happens, and that happens a lot. And I think you, as an instructor, you got to recognise that if somebody's pushing themselves out of their psychological comfort zone, it's actually what is something that's commonplace and an environment you're used to isn't for them, and you've got to be conscious of that, and you've got to take that into account. And a good instructor will work around that.
Yeah,
happened in flying all the time. Military flying training. By the time you've learned a skill, you'll then get tested, especially in the operational phase. You know everything that you need to know to a basic level. You then get tested, so you're pushed to capacity all the time. So you just get thrown an engine failure, for example, in the middle of a really busy bit of navigation. And you got to crack on. And it's obviously it's testing your capacity, pushing you at max capacity all the time. So just when you didn't want an engine fire simulated, when you're trying to make a busy radio call to negotiate across a bit of airspace, right? Well, next thing you know, you're looking for a field you can land in, deal with the fire, press the right buttons, make another radio call, swerve some wires, whatever it is. So yeah, I think the military flying training system is really good at highlighting, the limit of the human brain. So fascinating stuff.
When you were in the army then, and then subsequently the RAF, did you wear your green lid?
No, I wore my green lid obviously as a Royal Marine reservist for the 5 or 6 years, 5 and a bit years I was in. Then in the army I wore whatever the dark blue one at Sandhurst. Then I wore a maroon lid while I was with the paras on attachment. Then I wore the light light blue Army Air Corps beret, and obviously I had my dagger on my shoulder, on my arm, for the rest of my Army career. And then when I went across to the Air Force, wore the Air Force beret, and likewise had the dagger on, unless you're attached to a commander unit, then in which case you can wear your green beret with an RAF badge. But I just didn't think that looked right, so no, I didn't wear my green lid after that, as much as I would have liked to have done. No, but always wore my commando dagger with pride. So yeah, but I've probably got 6 different coloured berets.
Yeah, quite a collection.
Yeah, absolutely.
One for every occasion.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Chris, this has been absolutely one of the most thoroughly enjoyable and fascinating chats I've had in my 51 years on this planet. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute delight. It's been brilliant.
Oh, I wish you all the best at V-Force, and hope to come up and see you there at the soonest possibility.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So stay on the line, but thank you very much again. To our friends at home, massive thank you again for watching another episode or listening to another episode of the Bought the T-Shirt podcast. Big love to you and your families. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Hello, friend. I hope this finds you well. My name's Chris THRALL. I'm a former Royal Marines Commando, and I fought my way back from chronic trauma and addiction to live, work and travel in 80 countries across all 7 continents, achieving all of my dreams and goals along the way. Now I pass my simple system on to other people, but I can only help you if you like and subscribe. So please do so, because you get one life, and if you live it right, one is enough.